one is exactly. There's going to be a window of opportunity after Thursday's election, running up to the Labour Party conference, and just beyond that, when the manifesto then will start being wrapped up in earnest. And I think it depends on what happens on Thursday, really. If UKIP do have a boost, there might be some within the Labour Party that will argue to go to the right rather than to the left. That's going to be a problem. So there's going to be a real debate about what then happens. And I think what we've got to be, I think we've just got to be well organised and really sharp about how we pose these arguments now. I can't see that the way that we're going at the moment, on a sort of not particularly inspirational platform, is going to get us past the winning lot, basically. And we need a few flagship policies that define the party as it now could be going into government. And I think this whole area could be a flagship policy. And you just need to almost have a checklist of those areas where privatisation has taken place and people feel completely ripped off or vulnerable. You know, if you talk about privatisation of the NHS, people are immediately opposed to it, even though it's happening under the Tories and it's not being exposed at the moment. Part of the reason for it not being exposed is because a lot of things that they're doing are continuations or building on the foundations of what New Labour put in place. That's the tragedy of it. But nevertheless, there's still a resonance within the community. As Janine said and others have said, with rail, it is every opinion poll comes out in favour of renationalisation. We might not want to use that term, but that just broadly, in people, whatever people thought about British Rail, there's even romantic memories of what British Rail was all about. It might not have been brilliant, but it was better than the crap we've got now. Yeah, it is. And as you go through each area and you expose what's going on, you realise that you could really construct quite a powerful electoral coalition, couldn't you? And it isn't just, the whole point of it isn't just public sector workers, it's that whole train of public sector workers and their families, the people that they deal with, their clients, whatever you call them. There's a whole, it's millions of people that could, I think, be attracted to Labour by a very simple message that we're going to stop you being ripped off. When Ed got up and made that stuff about the energy prices, it was seen as his most effective Labour Party conference speech, and we immediately went up in the polls. And that was just about controlling prices. He's made this issue about rate controls a pretty feeble promise, but even that, this issue of potential controlling increase in rents, we again had a bit of a bounce in the polls. So I think this next few months we've got to be arguing, even if on a matter of principle, but electorally, the consequences of a firm stand on this could be terrific for us. And we've got to fend off, because the right will come at us after Thursday and try and push us back into New Labour policies to the right, etc. I think we've got to fend that off. The unions have a key role to play in all this. The affiliated unions have an absolutely key role in drawing a line in the sand on that, so that we can move forward. But in the Parliamentary Labour Party, I'll just take Tony's point about Caroline's bill. Caroline's bill is drafted on the basis of the trade union work that we've been doing through the trade union groups, basically. And so it has quite a wide level of support. And because she's got a name attached to it, we're still supporting it, but it could have been a Labour MP attached to that just as much as anybody else. And I think it will have quite a resonance within the Parliamentary Labour Party. And we'll do everything we can to make sure it's debated. But again, it's interesting. If you look at all those backbench debates that have taken place over the last 18 months, German debates and all the rest selected by Labour MPs, what are they doing? Most of them about defending public services in their area. Debates around the closure of tax offices, debates around what's happening within the DWP and the cutbacks there. So there is, even within the Parliamentary Labour Party, I've never been able to say this for 20 years, even within the Parliamentary Labour Party now, you can see a sort of groundswell of opinion that is recognising the importance of public services now. So there's potential there now.
Thanks, John. Janine, do you
want to I strongly agree with Steve's point. Steve, part of the problem is, come and talk to London Underground infrastructure workers, okay? They were not privatised by the Tories, they were privatised by the Labour Party. Come and try and persuade them to vote Labour. Good luck to you. I'll sponsor you if you like. So we definitely, if I'm going to go out and talk to my workmates about why they should vote Labour, I need a little bit more material than what I've got now. Now, here's an opportunity, and maybe John, you can have a word with your mate Ed about this one, right? David Cameron has just said if they get an overall majority, the Tories, in the general election, and they're not being restrained by the Liberals, right, then they are going to effectively ban tube strikes. Now, a clear statement from Mr Miliband that Labour won't do that. I mean, possibly too optimistic to ask for the repeal of the anti-union laws, but the idea they won't make them worse, and they won't let that, I'm not allowed to swear, it's family friendly, bloke who holds the office of Mayor of London at the moment, lecture us about 50% thresholds when he was elected on the votes of 16% of Londoners. Okay, a clear statement on that would help, because there are a lot of, you know, it's not surprising people in the RMT want to vote Tusk or want to stand as Tusk candidates, etc. But over the next year, as we get closer and closer to the general election, they're going to think more and more about who they want to win that general election and who they want to be the government. And even the most enthusiastic Tusk supporter will not think that Tusk is going to form the next government. And they'll be interested in who does, which party it should be, and what they should say. On Michael's point about franchise renewal, you're quite right, Lee. So this, you know, direct operated railways will be allowed to bid. That's the inch to the left. That's one of the inch to the left shifts that the Labour leadership has made over public ownership of the railways. You're right, there is a big danger that then the private top train operating company will win that bidding process by undercutting DOR. There's another danger as well, which is that DOR will win the bidding process by undercutting the private top. And we'll get the franchise on the basis of we'll sack a load of workers, we'll hold payback, we'll cut corners, we'll cut services, etc. Because the other thing you have to look at in franchises is the content of what the tender document says. The current round of franchise tender documents say we expect whoever bids to this to extend driver-only operation across the area of the franchise, i.e. to get rid of guards on trains, to close ticket offices, to extend automation of fares, that kind of stuff, so we need to fight over that as well. The other couple of things I wanted to mention was on the first contribution for Michelle, I'm very impressed by the WOW campaign. It's, you know, it got how many signatures on this petition for parliamentary debate? 100,000 signatures on the petition for cumulative impact assessment. And what's interesting to me is when the Tory Liberal coalition got elected, you had all these anti-cuts committees set up everywhere in loads of boroughs and whatever around the country. They've virtually all faded away. The one bit of the anti-cuts movement that's not faded away is the disabled people's anti-cuts movement. WOW, DPAC, organisations like that, still out there, Black Triangle, yeah. I'm a member of the TUC Disabled Workers Committee as well. We've got our conference next week. I predict it will be as unanimously angry as it always is. Most TUC and trade union conferences, every resolution is passed unanimously. It makes for very boring conferences, and it's usually because all the disagreements are kind of swept under the side, composited out, or considered too rude to raise. At TUC Disabled Workers Conference, the reason everything's passed unanimously is that everyone's so fucking angry with the government, and they pass a load of stuff that isn't tempered down, but is actually genuinely angry and militant. Final thing I wanted to respond to was Sasha's point about the workers' government. So London Underground was set up 151 years ago as a collection of private companies. It was brought into a form of public ownership in the early 1930s on the basis of a piece of legislation called the London Transport Act, which was drafted by Herbert Morrison when he was Minister for Transport in the 1929 minority Labour government. By the time it was actually passed, Rhodes and McDonnell and the General Secretary of the NUR had done their big defection to the Tories and set up a national, but it was passed by that government anyway. Now, so that's when London Underground came into public ownership. But even Ernest Bevin, not one of the great left-wing figures in the history of the Labour movement, described it as the worst possible form of public ownership. Because what Morrison did, and he called his policy a small piece of socialism, very, very, very small piece of socialism, brought it into I'm not even sure you could call it public ownership, put it under the control of a London Transport Board, and then gave every seat on that board to the previous owners of the private companies who owned all the separate lines, and allowed all the income from London Transport to be paid out in dividends to those shareholders for the first few years. And you look at all the material from those years, there's kind of mass, ad hoc, spontaneous passenger rebellions at bus stops all over London because the service becomes so bad under the first form of public ownership while the money's rolling into these people. So it shows that you don't just need public ownership legislated by a Labour government, because if that's not a Labour government that's functioning like a workers' government, then it ain't going to do it right. You know, that's why we need to talk about what sort of government we need, not just in terms of what colour rosette its MPs wear, but the actual political content of that government. and how accountable it is. If it's our government, if it's a Labour government, how accountable it is to us as a movement.
John, can I just come in on the franchises, on Janine's point?
Yes.
One of the arguments we've got to have in the Labour Party, which, with Balls in particular, is the cost of franchising is such that we're wasting millions. 400 million, we discovered, was spent on consultants, accountants and all the rest on the London Underground. So it's a lot of money. So each of those franchises will take out a large amount of public expenditure that we could use on the system itself.
And commissioning.
Exactly, and and I think that's an incredibly powerful argument
Yeah.
when you've got so many franchises coming back, so you can overcome that.
That's true, John, although